Vanakkam, Vandanam, Namaskaram, Namaste, good evening, Kiara to everyone. It is so good to see all of you again after a week long break in this show, Trendy, Thalaiva, Selva. That's every Wednesday, 6 p.m. onwards. Last week, we had like some great discussions so about the history of New Zealand elections and spoke about women's suffrage movement. And it was so wonderful to see all of you participate. Share your thumbs up, likes as well. We would love to have like more comments from you, more thoughts from you, more feedback from you, so that we can tailor make this show to make sure that we make it enjoyable, presentable, and likable to all of you. I hope to like bring more information as and when we progress about the latest trends, the ongoing discussions, heated topics, technology, sports, movies, entertainment, anything and everything under the sun. Um, in terms of like the issues that I want to talk about, I'm generally like someone who likes to talk about the issues that I'm passionate and I'm connected with. So, with respect to that, last week we spoke about elections, politics, women's suffrage movement, and this week the main topic that I'm gonna like sort of like pick up and talk is about climate change. That's something I'm deeply concerned about. Having visibly witnessed a lot of devastations in the past due to the changes in the climate and the sort of like carbon emissions that our industrial revolutions have brought. Um, I picked up to work in the space of climate change and sustainability after coming to New Zealand. I myself have worked in this space for more than 5 years, have direct first-hand experience in helping corporates to reduce their emissions and thus kind of like mitigate the climate risks that we already have got. We are somewhere in a stage where like currently it takes like everybody's contribution to be able to revert back the drastic effects this climate change could bring into our world. So today's topic is climate change, and we are going to delve a little deeper and understand what's climate change, what are the trends that are happening currently in the world, what our country New Zealand is doing towards mitigating the risk, and also some facts about like what India is doing in this climate change space. But before going there, my heart and thoughts are with all of you today who experienced the 6.4 magnitude earthquake in Christchurch this morning. I just moved from Christchurch 10 days ago, so it's really disturbing and also like concerning to know that Christchurch has had to go through a small quack today. I hope that it has not caused much defect to anyone, and every one of you are like probably safe. So my thoughts and prayers with you. Um, as usual, we'll begin the show with the Tirukural today. And every time when I want to bring Tirukural to you, I also want to bring the Kural that is relevant to that day's topic so that we can actually kind of like have a flow to whatever we are talking about. So this Kural is specifically written about how a country should be ruled and how a country should be looking at its people and its wealth. So it is Kural number 731. It's in the 73rd chapter of Thirukural, and the Kural is Thalla Vilayun Takkarum Thalvila Chelvarum Servadu Nadu. So that's the Tamil verse. I'm just going to translate it for you in English and explain it to you what it means. It means the kingdom is that in which includes its people, its ruler, etc., is a complete cultivation, virtuous persons and merchants with inexhaustible wealth dwell together, which means that a country that is ruled ethically, morally, and also according to encompassing the rules for not just the people but also its environment and the planet will be in a position to inculcate a lot of wealth, and that wealth will be delivering its outcome to the people, and thus a country will prosper. And it's just not the country that will prosper, it means that the people and the planet will also prosper. Which actually brings me to that topic of like climate change and how this is related. um, a good king is someone who will be able to actually rule the planet, rule the world in such a way that all the people follow the ethical and moral rules that will not only just protect their interest but also protect the wider interest of their country as well as the world. Which means that you are not overdoing or like overkilling the resources that are being available to you. You're being able to utilize the resources in an appropriate way, and then make sure that the resources are like shared between all of the people in an equitable and a fair way, and thus protecting the ecosystem, which means that you are not just protecting people, you're protecting the forest, the animals that dwell in the forest, the trees, the rivers, the lakes, and the water bodies, and also the land mass that people live in. Without all of these resources, we will be, not able to live or sustain our life in the planet, right? So we need all the resources to be inexhaustible for us to be able to have a prosperous and meaningful life. In that way, this Tirukural re-emphasizes the fact that every government is responsible for its people and its environment, which is of course the planet. And it also defines the fact that we people are equally responsible for being able to hold our governments and the people that we elect or rule um, accountable for being able to do their fair share for the people and the planet. In terms of climate change, what we are going to do is today, I'm not going to delve a lot more deeper into climate change and present you with like, and then inundating data or like statistics, but I'm just going to take you all briefly through an introduction of what climate change is in a layman's term so that you all can understand and make you understand the impacts and as well as like what this means, and look at some of the global trends that are being like set and happening in this climate change world. And then we will have a look into what New Zealand's efforts are in climate change mitigation, and then talk about India's initiatives. And also, we should be definitely talking about what you and me as an individual can do on our day to day lives. So without further delay, let's understand what climate change is, how do we define it, and what are its causes. Climate change actually refers to the long-term shifts in temperature patterns and weather conditions on Earth. Today, you might see unusual rains during summer, unusually rains in terms of the volume of downpour we get in like different places. All of this are attributed because of the fact of climate change. It is primarily caused by the increase in greenhouse gas emissions, particularly carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide. These gases actually trap the heat in the Earth's atmosphere, leading to the greenhouse effect and subsequent warming of the planet. Generally, human activities, industrial activities such as burning fossil fuels, deforestation, cutting down of trees, industrial processes like you expand and scale and grow and consume a lot of resources and then burn them, agricultural practices, particularly farming of beef and cattle, contributes significantly to the increase in the greenhouse gas emissions. So when we talk about greenhouse gas, there are like three gases: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Some of us would have been interested in chemistry when we were in school, would have known the names of these gases, and these three gases are primary contributors of climate change, which means that these gases are able to retain the heat in them for a longer period of time in the atmosphere, and because of the heat, the weather conditions are like warmer than normal. What are some of the consequences of the climate change? What happens if the temperature rises? We all like summer, right? So why don't we have like warmer days all through the all through the year. Climate change leads to gradual increases in global temperatures. It's not like it's going to be drastic increases, it's like gradual increases. Like every year, the average temperature of a country perhaps like is increasing by a degree or two. I think I may be exaggerating, but zero point 0.5, zero point 0.3 degrees more than what it used to be earlier. So these rising temperatures has far-reaching consequences than we actually think, including the melting of polar ice caps and glaciers. What happens if polar ice caps melts? There's going to be an increase in the sea levels, which contributes. And because of the increase in sea levels, a lot of coastal area are in threat. So that when the sea level increases, there is a high possible risk of water actually occupying the land, and because of which these coastal people have to either migrate or relocate to some other places which are like higher from the sea levels. It also leads to the overall disruption of the ecosystem and shifts in the weather patterns. We are having like warmer winters, colder summers, and unusual rains at different points of time. All of this shifts due to weather patterns are actually an impact because of climate change. When we speak about sea level rise, as the global temperature increases, the melting of ice from the glaciers and ice caps combined with the expansion of seawater due to warming. Because water temperature plays a significant role in maintaining the ecosystem within the water bodies. And because of the increase in temperature, water actually expands, which means that along with the rise in sea level, there is also water expansion that's happening. That leads to potential risk, which significantly can affect the coastal communities, infrastructure, and ecosystem. Think of the impact that water actually running into a city brings in. What sort of like infrastructure that would potentially damage, and then the insurance risk, life risks, and people actually leaving their homes and then migrating to a different place. So the risk levels there are like really really high and alarming. See, the entire point of this episode is not to scare you. The entire point of this episode is to give you the relevant information, and then you make an informed choice and hold the bodies accountable for delivering the results to make sure that we are mitigating the climate risks as much as possible. Um, when we want to discuss the impact on the ecosystem and agriculture and human health of climate change, the climate change disrupts the entire ecosystems by altering the temperature and precipitation patterns. And this affects the distribution and behavior of plant and animal species, leading to a biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation. Last week we also briefly spoke about like the butterfly effect or the chaos theory, right? And this pretty much integrates with our like way of living as well. We have this ecosystem where we have like different layers of herbivorous, omnivorous, and different types of animals. And one species extinct could actually cause a disruption in this entire ecosystem by disrupting the other species food cycle or the pattern of living, and thus could cascade into multiple effects eventually. Changes in this habitats and migration patterns can disrupt the entire ecosystem, impacting species interactions, food chains, and ecological balance on a long. In short, this is a threat to the human society. What are the impacts of climate change on agriculture? Climate change poses challenges to agriculture by altering the growing season, precipitation patterns, and prevalence of pests and diseases. Extreme weather events such as droughts and floods can damage crops, reduce yield, and threaten food security. If you go back and then read the news that has come from like several parts of the world, unusual rain during harvest season. Imagine how a farmer would cultivate their crop. Imagine what sort of like loss they would be incurring. Imagine what sort of like food security and threat it has on the entire global ecosystem. Wheat prices can go up, rice prices can go up. You and I will be struggling to get food on our plate because climate is actually disrupting our agricultural ecosystem, right? So changes in the temperature and precipitation can also impact livestock's health. Water availability for irrigation potentially could also cause diseases such as like viral infections, and also can create a pandemic. In terms of human health, climate change has direct and indirect impacts on human health. Heat waves can lead to heat-related illness and deaths. Changes in temperatures, as I said, that are actually going to create some sort of like disruption in the precipitation pattern that can in tandem affect the transmission of vector-borne diseases such as malaria and dengue for fever, right? Extreme weather events can cause injuries, displacement, and mental health issues. Climate change also impacts air quality with increased pollution and allergies, exacerbating respiratory conditional diseases. Right, so the more pollution the air has, the more effect it creates on human body. Some sort of like examples on how climate change is already affecting our ecosystem, just for your information. Rising ocean temperatures and increased acidity due to climate change have led coral bleaching events. So if you go to Great Barrier Reef today, the corals are already losing its colors and eventually like disrupting the entire ocean ecosystem. So if you have got time, please try to visit coral reef before it entirely dies down. There are some efforts by the scientists to restore the coral reefs, which is good, but you can't be like relying on restoration all the time because the ocean's acidity is like increasing day by day because of the increase in carbon dioxide in the air and atmosphere. In terms of forest, climate change affects the timing and durations of the seasons, which means that sometimes often like the flowers are like uncertain whether they should be blossoming now because they don't know whether it's spring. The flowers and the entire floral and fauna ecosystem follow the weather pattern. They follow the temperature pattern, and if that is getting disrupted, their entire lifestyle is going to get disrupted, and because of which there could be like cascading effects. And in Arctic and Antarctic regions, climate change has caused significant melting of ice already. You see like heaps and heaps of ice melting every day, affecting the habitat. You know, polar bears, whales, and those that lives in the Arctic and Antarctic region have issues with survival because of that. Species like penguins and seals are like finding it difficult to live and sustain their life. Loss of sea ice can also impact the entire Antarctic's and Arctic's food web, including zooplankton and fish populations as well. In terms of agriculture, climate change alters the temperature and affect the timing and length of the growing seasons. This can disrupt the planting and harvesting schedules of farmer, which potentially would be impacting the crop yields as well as the quality of the crop that we receive. Farmers may have to adopt and mitigate this risk by changing crop varieties and adjust their planting practices, which is not a friendly way to do agriculture, right? Like they have a pattern that they follow, and then if they need to change that, it's pretty tough for them. Water availability, one of the most impactful climate change risk that affects every one of us. So changes in this precipitation pattern again, like disruptive rainfall at times, no rain at times, drought at times, and this increased evaporation rate can lead to water scarcity in some regions. We do see, people walking for water for kilometers and kilometers in some areas of the world. Countries like Africa, countries in the continent of Africa have already been like significantly suffering out of this water issues. Droughts and water scarcity can impact the crop irrigation, livestock farming, and also agriculture productivity. In terms of the pest and diseases, climate change can influence the distribution of behavior of pests and diseases that affects the crops and livestock. So higher temperature and changing humidity level can facilitate the spread of the pests and diseases, leading to increased crop damage. And then these are some of the threats that are currently happening in the ecosystem. So what are the global trends like in this climate change space? So one is the temperature rise. So the Earth's average surface temperature has been steadily increasing due to the greenhouse gas emissions. And according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, the global temperature have risen approximately 1.1 degrees Celsius since the pre-industrial era, which means that the average temperature of the globe, which used to be like, say, X degrees centigrade at that time, have increased by X plus 1.1 degrees centigrade. And this is specifically due to the emissions of greenhouse gases. In terms of carbon dioxide level, the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, which is one of the primary greenhouse gas, have reached a record levels. As of 2021, the CO2 concentration exceeded 410 parts per million, the highest in millions of years. It's just not like a comparative data between the last 10 years. It has been for millions of years. And perhaps according to scientists, the maximum admissible carbon dioxide levels is approximately 250 parts per million, and we have exceeded that by 150 already. Imagine the impact that could create. Which means scientists are actually predicting an increase in 1.5 degrees centigrade in the next 5 to 10 years, which means that the average temperature that was X plus 1.1 would go to average temperature of X plus 2.6. Unimaginable damage that it could create. And extreme weather events, the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events such as hurricanes, heat waves, floods, wildfires have increased in many parts of the world, including India. Like recently, we could see some flash floods in Himalayas, Uttarakhand, damaging so many people and their lives. And There is also like an increased frequency or intensity of climate related disasters that are happening. I would say that heat waves, as I said, droughts and hurricanes, wildfires. We also saw some wildfires a couple of years back in California. It happens in Australia. There's also potential risk in New Zealand due to this. um, there are some progress that are being made in the climate agreement. According to IPCC, the Paris Agreement is the most recent climate agreement that countries, signed. This was adopted in 2015 under the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change, which is a landmark international agreement aimed at combating climate change. It sets the goal of limiting global warming well below 2 degrees uh, above the pre industrial levels, and pursuing efforts to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Um, which means that all the countries that are signed are like obliged to meet these targets on a year on year basis, and also declare their emission as well as mitigation measures to be able to limit their country's climate change and carbon plan. um, with all these effects, it's important to note that the current collective actions are not yet sufficient to limit the global temperature rise to the desired levels. There is a pressing need for an enhanced ambition, accelerated implementation of climate change and climate actions, and there is the need for global cooperation to address this challenge that is possessed. So now let's actually see what some of the efforts that are being put by New Zealand government to mitigate this. So New Zealand government actually passed the Zero Carbon Act, which was actually passed in 2019, setting a legal framework for New Zealand to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and transition to a low carbon economy. The Act establishes a target for net zero emissions of long lived greenhouse gases by 2050, and sets up an independent climate change commission to provide advice and monitor progress in meeting these targets. New Zealand also has an emission trading scheme which puts a price on greenhouse gas emissions and create a financial incentives to businesses to reduce their emissions, which is one of the most, I would say, a driving component for businesses because they are always like, behind money, and they might be able to do some significant measures to cut down. The ETS also covers several sectors, including energy, industrial processes, waste, and forestry, aviation as well. It encourages the transition to renewable energy sources and rewards projects that remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, such as reforestation. Most people go and plant trees. If people ask me, then I would encourage them that they should be able to cut down the emissions in the first place than actually go back and then plant trees after emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. um, the other effort that New Zealand government is doing is on the renewable energy and electrification part. So the government has set a target of 100% renewable electricity generation by 2030. This also involves promoting the development of renewable energy sources like wind, water, hydro, and geothermal power. The government also has been investing in electric vehicle initiatives. They are also into sustainable land use and forestry, and climate resilience and adoption has been like one of its focus, not just for the businesses but also for the local government organizations. New Zealand also has been spearheading international leadership in terms of being actively engaged in international climate change negotiations and agreements such as the Paris Agreement. The country is committed to an ambitious climate targets that has been advocating for increased global climate action. Other than that, there are like a lot of other measures that New Zealand government are taking. One can actually go to the Climate Change Commission's website to be able to understand the recent initiatives that the government has taken. So, if you happen to talk to your local body representatives, always please make sure that they understand and implement things that are going to be useful on a long term to mitigate the risks of climate change. We also should be understanding or like learning about what Indian government has been doing in this. So the Indian government launched a national action plan on climate change in 2008, which outlines 8 national missions to address various aspects of climate change. These missions include promoting solar energy efficiency, sustainable habitat, water conservation, and enhancing the forest cover in India. India, in collaboration with France, also launched an international solar alliance in 2015. The alliance is to promote solar energy, and then India also has been a leader in renewable energy expansion. We have taken significant measures on the energy efficiency initiatives. We are also focusing on afforestation and forest conservation. Which also like led the way to create this Green India mission. We are one of the leaders in electric mobility and public transportation, improvement to mitigate climate change risk, and we also have plans on climate resilience and adaptation. So these are some of the measures that are taken by the Indian government to address climate change. And finally, before wrapping up, I also would like to give some tips on like how individuals like you and me could actually contribute. So individual, small efforts collectively can help in achieving a larger goal. In terms of transportation, opt for walking, biking, and using public transport wherever possible. You can carpool, share ride with others to reduce the number of vehicles on the road. You can choose fuel efficient vehicles such as hybrid or EV, and you can minimize air travel and opt for video conferencing instead of like going for in-person meeting that are in shorter commuting distances. You can also contribute significantly on energy consumption savings. You can use electricity efficient appliances like the LED lights. You can turn off lights whenever it's not in use. Electronics and appliances, when not in use, should be definitely switched off. You can set thermostat at energy efficient temperatures, and you can also insulate your homes properly. You also can invest in renewable energy by installing solar panels on the rooftop so that you can generate clean and renewable energy at your home. And you can also switch to renewable energy providers and opt for green energy tariffs offered by some of the utility companies. You can also make sustainable food choices by opting for locally sourced and seasonal food to reduce your carbon footprint and reduce meat consumption, or opt for plant based alternatives, as livestock farming contributes to a significant greenhouse gas emissions. You also can reduce the food waste by planning your meal in advance, composting the organic waste that you produce, and then storing the food properly and not wasting too much of it. In terms of water conservation, you can reduce water consumption by fixing the leaks, using low flow fixtures, and practicing mindful water usage. Opt for water efficient appliances and consider rainwater harvesting and irrigation purposes. In terms of waste reductions, you should always practice the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Minimize packaging waste and prioritize usable products or reusable products. And you can compost organic waste to reduce methane emissions from landfill. And you can also avoid single use plastics and make sure that you are actually organizing eco friendly alternatives. So, you also can practice sustainable purchasing when you make purchase decisions, when you go out and then shop for things. So these are some of the efforts that an individual can take. There are a lot more that we should be and could be talking about climate change, and it's a never ending discussion and topic for me because I'm so passionate about it. However, we are restricted by time, and the show is actually going to be for 30 minutes going onwards. But it's actually every Wednesday, so we are going to come back and then pick up, in case if we leave something, or like if you want to learn something more. With that, I am going to sign off for today. You have been watching Trendy Thalaiva Selva with me, and I am live from Melbourne, and I'm going to be with you every week on Wednesday, 6 p.m. And if you have any feedback, comment, or anything that you want to share with us, please do share that in the comment section or send us an email at indialivepresenters@gmail.com. Until I see you next week, you all have a good day, evening, week. Enjoy, and please be feel. Please be safe. Thank you.